Yemen's Ansarullah armed forces launched an attack on vital facilities belonging to Saudi Aramco inside the kingdom's western province of Medina, situated about 165 kilometers west of the city of Medina. The attack took place on Friday and involved the launching of both ballistic missiles and drones. It came in retaliation for deadly Saudi attacks against the Al Jawf province in Yemen last Friday. Yemeni army spokesperson Brigadier General Yahya Sari' said in a press conference on Friday that the Yemeni army struck energy facilities in addition to sensitive sites in the Saudi port city of Yanbu as part of the freshly launched operation, the third balance of deterrence. Sari' revealed that Yemeni forces used a squadron of 12 Samad-3 combat drones, as well as a volley of winged and long-range ballistic missiles to carry out the attacks. Sari' asserted that they came as revenge for Saudi attacks and confirmed that Saudi Arabia will suffer painful strikes if it continues its onslaught against Yemen. There has been no official comment from Saudi Arabia yet about the attacks on its oil facilities, and casualty number have also not yet been revealed. Late last week, Ansarullah air defense units managed to target and shoot down a multi-role tornado fighter jet over the skies of Al Jawf with an advanced surface-to-air missile. Multiple reports from Yemeni media have been reporting since last week that Ansarullah had captured the fighter jet crew and that they are not Saudi nationals. Rather, they are reportedly from a Western country. If proven true, this capture reveals that Western countries are directly involved in the war, not only by providing Saudi Arabia with internationally prohibited weapons, but also with military pilots. Welcome to the Mideastream. I'm Marwa Osman. Yemen's Ansarullah declared they had attacked sensitive targets with high precision in Aramco oil facilities in Saudi Arabia's western province of Yanbu. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia continues to deny that the strike was actually successful. To discuss this issue with us from Beirut is Laith Marouf, political analyst. Thank you very much for being with us, Mr. Marouf. Now, it is really amazing that 5 years after the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's heavy and repetitive bombardment of Ansarullah sites in Yemen, along obviously with residential areas all across the provinces in Yemen, Ansarullah was still able to develop ballistic missiles, long-range ballistic missiles, and still is, up until now, fully capable of targeting the heart of the kingdom, whether in Yanbu or other places to the north, also targeting Aramco oil facilities. Now, how can the Saudis look at us straight in the eye and tell us that their goals in this war have been met?
They don't really have to look us in the eye. They use their hundreds of television stations, radio stations, and publications that they own in the world, in the Arabic world specifically, to regurgitate and repeat over and over their lies. And these lies are carried over by the Western imperialist media and repeated over and over. So to them, they think that they don't have to tell the truth, that if you repeat a lie enough, they think that it becomes a truth.
Well, 10 days ago, other than the targeting of Saudi Aramco in Yanbu province, in the western Yanbu province of Saudi Arabia, 10 days ago, Ansarullah air defense units managed to target and shoot down a multi-role tornado fighter jet over the skies of Al Jawf province with an advanced surface-to-air missile, marking a setback for a military alliance known for its air supremacy and signaling maybe new levels of advancement for Ansarullah in this war against Yemen, with increasingly potent military arsenal here. What interests me is that the Ansarullah, they had captured the crew. They say that they had captured the crew of that, the pilots, the two pilots of that plane, and what they say is that they are not Saudi nationals, rather Western pilots. Where do you think these pilots are actually from, and why haven't we even heard about it in the mainstream media yet?
Well, for now, we don't know exactly where they're from, but we have a general idea that they will be definitely, most probably, American. The United States has been involved in training and also providing mercenary forces for the United States for specifically the use of such advanced weaponries. Usually, this reminds me of a really racist movie produced by Eddie Murphy in the 1980s. It's called Best Defense, and it mocks how the West sells only probably defected weapons to countries in the Gulf, and or throws its old stockpiles on the Gulf, makes them spend their money. And at the same time, because these countries really don't have armies that are capable or trained, most of these advanced weapons are either manned directly by American troops, in the case of weapons that the Americans don't even want to hand over to the Saudis or the Emiratis, and or are manned by these mercenaries if they are actually in control of the weaponry in the situation of the, of these F-16s and F-15s. And we saw also even on the ground force, the Saudis don't have their own army. They have to purchase basically Sudanese slaves to go to the front. Most of these Sudanese soldiers don't even know that they were going to the front. They were just taking jobs, as we heard, hundreds of their families come to the Sudanese government asking for the return of their children who were taking regular jobs in the Emirates and finding themselves in a front in Yemen. So yeah, these countries don't have their armies. They are dependent on mercenaries both on the ground and Western mercenaries to man these advanced weapons.
Well, Ansarullah know exactly where it hurts inside the kingdom, hence that's why they've been targeting Aramco oil facility, which is the black gold of the kingdom. Now, at every time Aramco is hit, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia denies that there was a strike, despite the fact that we have seen multiple videos uploaded on social media by Saudi citizens. Their own CCTV cameras were actually used by 60 Minutes last time they were hit up north in Saudi Arabia. And they still try to deceive the world, while the world knows that they are being deceived by Saudi Arabia. But again, the mainstream media just bombards us with op-eds about how very sympathetic views about how the kingdom is maybe not even passing these things as lies, how the kingdom is being witnessed as a victim by the West. Indeed, this is a handbook of media and corruption working hand in hand to deceive the public. But is it still working, though?
See, I mentioned in the first question that Saudi Arabia owns these hundreds of television stations and so forth, media propaganda machines. Luckily, in the past 10 years, there's been a change in the availability of technology and its cheapness in terms of media production, and also the availability of social media. So this new democratization of media technologies is, creating a huge problem for not only Saudi Arabia and its lies, but let's say Israel and the whole imperial camp. A person with a regular cell phone can film the truth, put it out on social media and so forth, and then the whole machine of propaganda that is costing hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, to create these fabricated stories or idea of the imperial strength against the resistance is collapsing before our eyes because of this democratization of technology of media.
Well, at the same time, the humanitarian situation in Yemen remains catastrophic, where according to the Yemeni Government Center on Human Rights, the numbers are in only January 2020, coalition fighter jets launched 164 airstrikes and dropped 1,258 shells and missiles at 18 residential buildings, 71 residential areas, 7 farms, an airport, a school, and a university. Now, keeping in mind that up until now, since March 15, 2015, there has been more than 200,000 lives lost in Yemen. I'm talking about civilian lives here. I failed to ask any other question rather than when will this stop?
Well, obviously, the sacrifice of the Yemeni people is what is going to bring this to an end. And historically, we know that Yemen has never been conquered, specifically the mountains of Yemen. Sana'a has never been conquered by any invading army. And so the arrogance of the Saudis and the arrogance of the empire behind them think that they can change what geography and history and time has proven over and over again. The Yemeni people will be defeating the Saudi invasion and the imperial plan to chop up Yemen, and we're seeing it happen in, and we have to put it in a context of regional battle right now. The resistance in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon have already spoken and said they are acting in a regional manner with Iran's help, and we have a regional conglomeration, a regional problem right now, and the solution in Syria will bring the solution in Yemen, will bring the freedom in Palestine also.
Well, but it seems that even if the war stops right now in Yemen, according to the latest report of the UN, that the catastrophe, the famine and the starvation will not end now. This brings us to the role of the Western democratic, the screaming democratic countries of the West and their roles in causing this starvation. Who will make them pay for their decision-making process?
Unfortunately, international law is de facto, meaning if you can't enforce it by your power, it is non-existent. And we know right now that every American and British Prime Minister and President since at least 2001, if we don't want to go back further than that, since 2003 and the invasion of Iraq, should be in The Hague, jailed for war crimes and crimes against humanity. And so, we will not be seeing justice if we don't take it by our hand, and that is what international law is.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Laith Marouf, talking to us from Beirut as a political analyst to talk about the Yemeni issue with targeting Aramco in Yanbu and also the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. Thank you very much for being with us, Laith. Now, please stay tuned for our next special segment from Idlib with an independent journalist. Stay tuned. Turkey is warning of a large-scale military operation in Idlib amid ceasefire talks. The threat follows recent fatal clashes with the Syrian Arab Army, while the Russian government has urged restraint. Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayib Erdogan has been ironically stressing that the Syrian Arab Army should be restrained in Syria's Idlib. A Turkish-Syrian face-off in Idlib in this following report. Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan talked Syria over the phone last week as their troops squared off in Idlib province. The topics of Syrian sovereignty and terrorist threat loomed large. Putin expressed serious concern about the ongoing aggressive actions of extremist groups and emphasized the need for unconditional respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria. Moscow and Ankara agreed to intensify bilateral consultations on Idlib, along with intensive military contacts. It wasn't clear how that would translate on the ground in Idlib, where Turkey keeps sending troops and tanks. Idlib is the last remaining stronghold of terrorist groups that once sought to overthrow the Syrian government, with the backing of Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and the West. The dominant force in the province is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, an al-Qaeda affiliate previously known as al-Nusra. Over the past month, the Syrian army has dealt a series of defeats to the militants, liberating the last occupied suburbs of Aleppo, rendering civilians in Aleppo safe again, and unblocking a strategic highway to the coast. Turkey responded by sending troops and weapons into the province and manning what Turkey refers to as observation posts established under a ceasefire agreed years ago, which have now been deemed as occupation posts by the Syrian government. There have been multiple clashes between Syrian and Turkish groups as a result of the Turkish aggression. Last Thursday, militant groups launched an attack on Syrian army positions supported by Turkish artillery until the Russian bombers intervened. The Turks only ceased fire after Moscow contacted Ankara via the military hotline. While Turkey insists it will not back down from Idlib, its officials also seek to dispel fears that this could escalate into an open war with Russia, with Damascus insisting on liberating Idlib from the grip of terrorist groups that even the US and its NATO allies admit are a menace. It is unclear how that particular circle can be squared. As such, Turkish President Recep Tayib Erdogan declared that he will meet next month the leaders of Russia, France, and Germany to discuss the situation in northwest Syria. To discuss this latest issue with us from Idlib is Vanessa Beeley, who is an independent journalist. Thank you very much for being with us, Vanessa. Before we start talking about what's going on between Turkey and Russia, let us start with where you are right now. What's going on where you are? Please tell us what's happening on the ground in Idlib.
Well, actually, I'm back in the safety or the relative safety of northern Hama right now in Al-Skarbiya, one of the Syrian Christian towns that was targeted for 8 years by the terrorist groups, supported, of course, by Turkey, by Erdogan, encamped in Idlib. I've been in the last 2 days in Marat al-Numan and in Sarakeb. Yesterday in Sarakeb, we actually received more than 40 missiles in the town and on the road itself while we were working. I have to say also that in Idlib, what we noticed is the increase in Turkish so-called observation points or military points. I photographed 4 of them, but there are now an estimated 43 Turkish military points in Idlib. So this is a complete violation of international law, of course. The invasion of sovereign territory of Syria. Of course, they've been invading via their proxy military anyway, but now we have a direct invasion by a NATO member, by Turkey, of Syrian territory. 43 military bases. They are not observation points. One, for example, has actually been erected across the road to Aleppo from Damascus. So we have to divert onto country roads to arrive at Marat al-Numan and Sarakeb. And that's in the last few days that's been put up.
Well, my hope is for you to stay safe, dear Vanessa. Now, with the Russian and the Turkish maybe dialogue about a certain ceasefire in that area, about reducing tension in Idlib, what are they going to actually talk about? This is a Syrian land undergoing liberation from a terrorist group. What does Turkey want?
Look, the political talks are on another dimension. What's happening on the ground is what is really important. In the last few hours, the terrorist groups, which are, of course, supported by Turkey, you can consider them as Erdogan's proxies, have retaken Nayrab. There have been ongoing battles for Nayrab for the last maybe 1 week. And, of course, what they will then try to do is to secure the intersection of the M5, which is the road from Damascus to Aleppo, and the M4, which takes you from Aleppo to Latakia. So for them, Sarakeb and Nayrab are strategic points which they are not prepared to lose. So what we've seen today, for example, on the way back, I passed maybe 3 or 4 vans carrying Syrian Arab Army wounded to Khan Shaykhun Hospital. Nayrab at the moment, on the latest information, is back in the hands of the terrorists. Of course, the Syrian army will counterattack. But what we are seeing now is Erdogan, having effectively lost the jewel in his Ottoman crown, which was Aleppo, attempting to secure areas of Idlib, which will give him the upper hand, both in negotiations and from a military perspective.
But given, given the entire scene that you just described, Vanessa, do you think that the political talks will actually bear fruit, given that Russians have bombed Turkish military positions in the past, and they might do it again, which might open up a whole new war?
Yeah, I think, Russia, as always, is playing the realpolitik game. They are pragmatic geopolitical specialists, let's say. Much of their specialism has come from the war in Syria, from their intervention from 2015. So I think we will see Russia, above all, trying to avoid this level of hot confrontation. However, they are not going to put their own military personnel and humanitarian personnel. Their humanitarian personnel are managing many of the humanitarian corridors that are effectively allowing civilians to safely leave areas of Idlib under conflict. So, Russia is not going to put their own personnel on the ground at risk. If Turkey puts them at risk, then Russia will respond. Then it depends on to what extent Erdogan is prepared to escalate this war. I have my doubts that he's prepared to go for a full-out confrontation with Russia.
Well, the Syrian Arab Army has been advancing on multiple fronts in Idlib as well. We have seen other places being all across Syria being liberated, starting from Daraa to Deir ez-Zor to Hama, Homs, and lately Aleppo. What makes Idlib any difference? Why is the Turkish position towards Idlib very vital? And to be honest with you, it seems like it's all or nothing, whether they take it or they leave it, but they're ready to kill more of their soldiers to get it. Why is that?
I think basically for Erdogan, the greatest loss was Aleppo, with the liberation of West Aleppo and therefore the ensuring of the freedom of all of Aleppo, not just East Aleppo or Central Aleppo, but all of Aleppo. The army now is moving towards Ariha, which of course is to the north of Aleppo. The fact is that Erdogan was hoping, I believe, in the last 2 or 3 days, I've entered areas which were effectively under the control of Erdogan. There are Turkish flags everywhere. There's Turkish supplied equipment, food, hospital equipment in every area I went to, in Sarakeb, in the countryside, in Marat al-Numan. So Erdogan clearly saw that he was establishing the Al-Qaeda caliphate in Idlib. So this is his, this is his attempt to annex further Syrian territory. Of course, he had previously taken Iskandarun. He had his eye on Aleppo. He's been effectively conducting a strategy of industrial theft from Idlib, stealing the electrical power grids, the factories, just as he did in Aleppo. This man is the embodiment of evil in the eyes of the majority of Syrians here. They see that he is coming here, he's stealing their industry, their infrastructure, he's destroying what he can't steal, and he's occupying what he can in order to keep his foothold inside Syria. But this is not going to work. Russia will not support this violation of international law, and the Syrian Arab Army will not support this occupation of their sovereign territory. He will lose. But, we are not talking with someone who's psychologically stable. We're talking with someone who is the equivalent to a mafia boss, who is intent on his neo-Ottoman ideology.
Well, Vanessa, Turkey has officially asked the U.S. to conduct sorties along its border with Idlib to show some sort of support for Ankara's ongoing military aggression against Syria, and reportedly has also asked Washington for 2 batteries of Patriot missile systems to shield its border areas from air attacks. This is what they are saying in Turkey. Now, why does Erdogan think that the U.S. would actually lift a finger to help them when they dropped their Kurdish friends like a hot potato when they reached an agreement with Russia?
Look, I think Erdogan is, if you like, NATO's last stand in Syria. We've seen in the last 2 weeks a series of aggressions against Syria by Israel, for example, in coordination with Turkish military strategy in Idlib. So while we may consider that the US would not be insane enough to actually support even a NATO member state in such blatant, brazen violation of international law, we are seeing effectively Israel, which we know to be a satellite state of the US, effectively supporting Turkish military strategy in Idlib. So while the US may not overtly support Turkey's strategy in Idlib, of course, Israel is supporting it. Damascus was bombed 2 nights ago. So we know that there is support for Turkey's strategy, because effectively what he's doing is maintaining a NATO foothold in Syria. Whether America will overtly come into the confrontation to this extent, I doubt very much. But what they will do is to, for example, trigger other elements within inside Syria who are effectively proxies of the United States. We know that that includes the SDF and ISIS, etc. So I don't think we will see such an overt display of support by the United States, despite Erdogan's pleas for support. But we will see, for example, maybe further aggression from the Zionist state.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Vanessa Bili, independent journalist, for speaking to us about the latest in Idlib and around the area from the Turkish aggression against Syrian land. Thank you very much. Please stay safe. We'll talk to you soon again, hopefully. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned next week for more from the Mideastream.